Hi everyone. We're going to talk a little bit over the next couple of days about textual criticism and how that process, how we get from the Hebrew and Aramaic Old Testament and the Greek New Testament to the, let's say, English translations that we use. And textual criticism is the process by which we look at the various manuscripts that we have, the Hebrew manuscripts, the Greek manuscripts. We look at them and we determine, to the best of our abilities, what was the original reading, what was originally written in the autographs. And maybe I should take a second and define a couple of terms briefly, trying to keep this short. But the autograph is the original material that the original author put their pen to or their writing tool to. So let's say you think that Paul wrote one of the letters. When Paul's writing utensil hit the papyrus or whatever, that was the autograph, the original one that he wrote. Everything that was copied after that would be considered a manuscript. So of course we don't have any of the autographs today; they're all gone for the biblical text. And so how do we look at the many copies, the many manuscripts and manuscript fragments that we have, and determine as far as we can what the original autograph said in the various places? And I used to pastor a church, and one of the exercises that we did, I'm kind of nerdy, I wanted to show them how this worked. And so I'd use this letter exercise, and I kind of wanted to quickly walk through it with you today to sort of show you some of the basics of how, first of all, we got the many manuscripts that we have today, and then how we can sort of try to the different methodologies for trying to work backwards to see what the original reading was. Now, as a caveat here, this is not meant to be some exhaustive thing. All you textual critics out there, just this is an introductory thing. So just to kind of give everybody an idea of sort of the process by which these things can happen. So let's take a look. What I did is I wrote out by hand a letter similar to this one. And I'll walk through a couple of things here just to point it out. I wrote it by hand. It's not exactly the greatest, it's not the neatest handwriting that, or print that a person could have. And I did that sort of intentionally. So, Dear John, I wanted to write and tell you that we, and I slashed that out, I will be coming to your house next Thursday. We will be at the, and then if you look at the beginning of the next line, the again, as if I forgot that I'd already written the when I went down to write the third line. Corner of the ninth and instead of writing and with a D, I wrote with a G. Grand, I didn't capitalize the G in grand, around 7 p.m. What the hell is up with this weather? I spelled weather incorrectly. I hope it doesn't keep raining cats and frogs instead of cats and dogs all week. See you, Frank. Now, I took this letter, and you can see the errors that you might consider errors. Maybe they weren't originally. For example, let's take a look down here at frogs. It's possible that John and Frank had an inside joke, right? And they maybe back in some earlier time they made some joke about cats and frogs, and they were just writing it here in this letter. So you might think that this was an error. He really meant to write cats and dogs, and maybe that's true, but it's also possible that he didn't. He actually meant to write frogs, and it was a joke between the two of them, or a play on words, or something that we didn't get reading this after the fact. So what I did is I took this and I made photocopies of it and gave them to, I think, 3 or 4 different people and said, copy this. And I didn't give any further instructions. I didn't say copy it exactly. I didn't say, make sure you correct things that are wrong. I didn't say anything. I just let the copyists sort of do what they were going to do. And it took a minute or two, or a couple minutes, and they copied it out. And then the copies of the originals that I gave them, they were to take those copies and give them to 3 or 4 other people. And then those people were to copy them. And then the process, we did it one more time. And so, I don't know, we ended up with, somewhere between 12 and 20 manuscripts, something like that. And I took them all back home and labeled each one in the upper right-hand corner, manuscript A, manuscript B, C, D, and so on. Okay? Now, I took all of the variations that I saw. For example, this is one that was really common. Here, when the writer would get to tell you that we, and then I'd crossed it out, logically, many of them didn't write the we and cross it out. They just assumed that the cross out meant I didn't want it in there, and so they took it out. So if you read the manuscript, their manuscript, it would say, and tell you that I. No evidence of the we with a line crossed out. The same thing here. We will be at the corner. If they caught that, they would delete one of the thes. If they didn't catch it, of course, it would be deleted anyway, right? Because their I would skip over it. So what I did at the end, after looking at all the manuscripts, going through and highlighting all of the variations, that's what we call them, all the variants, I put them together in a score. And if you look here, score might not be the right word here. I put them in a footnoted area down here, and put footnotes in the text wherever there was a variant. Wherever there was a variation in any of the manuscripts, I put a little superscript mark and footnoted it down here. So, for example, if you read this, Dear John, this text up here represented the original. If you look, it represents this original letter that I wrote, the autograph, right? Dear John. Well, if you look at the footnote here, manuscripts C and D, instead of writing John, they wrote Jon. So they corrected John to John. I wanted to write and if you look here at the 2, you come down, manuscripts C and D wrote write to tell you, as opposed to and tell you that. So a little syntactical change took place. So I'll point out one more, where it says here, what the hell is up with this weather, huh? If you look at footnote 13, manuscripts B and D correct that to what has been up with. Now, you can think this was done in a church setting, so them seeing what the hell is, they might feel uncomfortable writing the phrase what the hell is up. And so instead they corrected that to what has been up. So these types of corrections, and then the gathering of these types of variants, corrections was the wrong word there. These types of variants, when they occur in the text, when you gather them from the various manuscripts and you put them down here in what we call the apparatus, you can see that each of the manuscripts that vary from the text, from the original, the original is not the right word in textual criticism sense, from the text that we're using as the base text, in this case it's the original text, you can see what all of the different variations are. Next time, tomorrow, we'll look at the different methodologies for how to interpret the apparatus. Because see here, we know what the original was, right? I'm telling you that this was the original one that I wrote. But what if we didn't have the original and all we had were these variants? We would have to develop a methodology to determine which readings down here in the apparatus represent most likely the original reading. So, for example, if you didn't have the original here and all you had was down here John, and all of the other manuscripts had John John, you might say, well, let's say 8 of the manuscripts have John, and only 2 here of the manuscripts have Jon. The majority of the manuscripts have John. Therefore, the correct reading, the original reading, was John. That would be a majority, looking at the majority of the manuscripts and trying to determine what the original reading was. We'll take a look at this methodology more tomorrow, but it's not quite that simple. But this is the general, this is what we're up against, I suppose you could say, when trying to understand what the original autographs, had in the biblical text. So stay tuned for tomorrow to take a look at some of the methodologies that people use to try to get back to the original autographs. Thanks.